Thank you. Very interesting perspective there in terms of structural change. One is the role of NSDC, but also the culture. In fact, one of the biggest reasons that vocational training course is such a... See, Australia is a role model for, every other country. Even NSDC has taken a lot of, best practices from there. But still, that dignity of labor, right? I think that's a very, very interesting point. And there are other structural issues like basic education and college education. Probably you will not get in there because that's a huge subject by itself.
I'll just add one more, which I think is a phenomenon we are noticing in our own markets, right? Uber and Ola are driving a lot of change, right?
Yes.
There are several people who are now recognizing that driving a cab is a lot more lucrative than... So fundamentally, paths to respectability, paths to livelihood are going to become drivers of this change.
Sorry, I think just to add to what add to what you said, taking off from that Uber case, somewhere down the line, I think we need to come out of this stigma of not holding a graduate degree, right? Once we do that, possibly we should be able to take a lot of vocational and entrepreneurial initiatives without going to a university. So I leave one question with you when you have Q&A, maybe some of you can answer, is should we have a 1-year break between high school and university when you have to compulsorily intern anywhere, intern? Do we need to do that? Because possibly it's going to change your perspective rather than being pushed into some sort of a university education. That's question number one. Question number two is, like we've been talking about industry, right? Now, when you talk about industry, of course, something that comes in the mind where there's a lot of opportunity in agriculture, right? There's a lot of opportunity in rural areas. So, do we really need to look at skilling out there? Because I'll leave with one example, and that's very pertinent because I just came back from Calcutta, and that is where I visited an outfit called BanglaNatok.com. It means BengaliTheatre.com. And this group, a couple of guys, ex-TCS people who were in New York with a very lucrative job, they came back to Calcutta, and they are actually running, I think they have adopted 5 or 6 states, a lot of villages in those states, and they are trying to inculcate a dignified way of earning for themselves, for these people in the villages, and bringing them above the poverty level. And you know what they are doing? What kind of skills they are doing? They are trying to bring back the lost art and culture in those villages. Lost art and culture and music. So what has happened is because of a lot of urbanization, the resident art and culture and music of the villages has died down. And those used to be the basic source of sustenance for these people. So they are trying to bring it back and help these guys to earn a living out of that and come out of the poverty line. Now that is also a kind of skilling, and this is kind of a structural change that they are trying to bring, a kind of revolution within the rural areas. And why do these people need to migrate into urban areas if they can be self-sufficient within, right? So this is another example of a structural change, a slow revolution that possibly can happen if we can think out of the box and not restrict ourselves just to a textbook style of education,
And just if I can add a quick word, Ram. I think the millennial community, we've spoken about the skill gap, but I think they're also bringing so much more energy to the table in each of our organizations and opening our eyes. I mean, we are learning a lot every day in terms of what are some of the newer paradigms that we should look at, not just for them, but for across the organization, right? The APAC rotation program that I spoke about is not something we had convened, but for the push from this group of people that wanted that more. You show us the moon and you show us the stars when you hire us, but you're putting us in a function and putting us in a silo. Give us more. They want us to throw business challenges at them. They want opportunities to solve it. And that, I think, structurally, talking about structural changes, is enabling and forcing organizations in some way to look at things out of box. Not just for them, but for across the community, right? For instance, we started something called Shadow a Leader, where a millennial or anybody could sign up and spend a dedicated number of hours actually following a leader in their day-to-day kind of roles, how they kind of articulate, how they negotiate, how they make business pitches, whatever, right? they're forcing the organizations to think differently and to look at, kind of uncharted, facets that we had never thought about, right? For instance, we're looking at bringing women back to work and giving them a second career. We never thought it was possible, right? But we believe now we've done this first batch. We have 100 women that we are now putting through a boot camp. It's super success. I think some of the people that I'm seeing there is kind of kicking it out of the ballpark, right? So I think the structural changes are happening because there is a forcing structure that's coming from the newer generation.
There's one second. I gave you a question a little before. There's one second question that I'm leaving with you is, people talked about CSR, right? And today it is mandated that 2% of your profit needs to be invested in CSR, if I got the figure right. Now, the second question is, would you support the idea of having something similar in terms of percentage of your profits that are invested in human resource development within the corporates? Does it become mandatory? Because when you look at the industries, there are imbalances. There are some companies which invest hugely. Some companies, they actually do a lot of bean counting. They may not be investing enough. So do you consider it's the right approach to make it mandatory that a certain percentage of your profits needs to be reinvested in people development? Just, so that everybody has a role to play in skill development across.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rakesh, for the views. We'll just pause here. I think we'll take some questions, and I wouldn't say that we will continue with our discussion, but I think we have run short of time, but we'll spend the next 15-20 minutes taking questions from each one of you. And in that aspect, probably we can cover the other part of the skill gap on how industries are changing, and there is a different aspect of skill gap in this whole issue, that our industries are changing, technology is changing, and in future the skill gap is going to become very different. But that's for another day, but let's take some views, questions from each one of you. One request is, please keep your questions short. Please introduce yourself, name and the organization, and questions, or even opinions, comments, but probably a request is to keep it short, so that we can take a lot of questions and a lot more discussions. Shoot. Yes.
So we had questions which is, should organization invest in near skill sets and retrain the employees? If that is yes, till what extent do we invest in these retrainings, or till what extent do we retrain individuals?
Your question is directed to any specific panelist? Okay. And if you want to take this? Okay. So what is the question is, how much an organization should invest in retraining its employees rather than hiring?
Till what extent should we invest in this?
Okay. To what extent should we invest? It depends, in the sense that from the industry, technology industry, from where we come from, I'll give you a simple statistics. Right? In TCS, right now we allocate people for projects and we train them in different technologies. And for the 335,000 employees that we have, 50% of the technologies that we expect the employees to work on did not even exist in 2009. Right? 50% of the technologies. In another 3 years, we know that we will be asking our employees to work on technologies which does not even exist now. Right? So it is no longer a question, probably it's no longer an option. So that is one perspective from a technology industry. If you look at manufacturing industries, the nature of how we manufacture equipments are changing. Artificial intelligence, robotics, and things like that. So I think we are at that time of history or civilization where the technology is completely changing, and how much we are going to invest is no longer an option. I think we have to constantly see, that is going to be the constant way we look at our business. Constantly invest a substantial amount, that depends on where we want to get in, substantial amount of our investment in terms of retraining, reskilling people. So every time a technology changes, hiring a new skill is no longer the answer. So I think to get back to what Jayanti mentioned about earlier, hire for knowledge. Okay, if you're going to start hiring for skills, that's no longer sustainable. You hire for knowledge, hire for attitude, and like all the gentlemen here mentioned about, gentlemen and ladies, sorry, mentioned that skilling you can always do. by investment. But provided you have the right attitude, or knowledge, you can marry CSR and skill development. You can bring in a lot of analytics to look at skill development differently, and you can look at a lot more initiatives to, skill people differently. So it's no longer an option.
Yeah, possibly you'll have an advantage if you have people who have a higher trainability. Because what I'm trying to say is, if you are getting two guys with the same set of knowledge and skills in the beginning, but eventually you find that both the knowledge and skills are actually getting outdated because of new products, new technologies, you could find that one of them is more trainable, and that is where possibly your question could also be pretty relevant as to what do we do with the second guy who is not trainable? How hard we try to reskill or retrain him. So trainability is a trait which is extremely important and gives any employee an upper hand who is capable of being flexible enough to pick up any skills or knowledge at any point of time. So I think the answer lies in trainability. So we need to have more people who are trainable.
Thank you for your question. The next question? Yes, sir. Can one of you pass on a mic? Oh, okay. We'll take his question first and then move on to Weekend, if you don't mind.
My name is Radhakrishnan. I represent a pharmaceutical company. I'm very familiar with the questions because for the last 20 years we've been talking of skill gaps, I'm still agreeing with you. I'm also the same boat as you. I liked Rajesh Gupta's view saying when we as HR people or as managers, when we get into defining what skill it takes for a particular job, I think half the job is done. For example, when Patni Computers, long back, about 10, 12 years back, when they realized these graduates, engineers who are first-class guys and good marks guys leave us in 1 year time or less than 1 year, for that matter. Their turnover went up to 30%. They started thinking and really looking at the kind of skills they wanted. They did attempt taking the raw graduates from the colleges, even BComs and BScs, diploma, anybody who's ready to learn computers enough. And they solved the issue. I was also part of a medical transcription company, a large company, where we knew the skill is not at all available. There is nothing to train them from the school or anywhere. So what the company did, had a training school. It was a fee-based training, but the only guarantee is at the end of the training, job is available. So that became another thing. Also, I think there's a lot of gap in the way the country visions itself, and also the companies as managers and as industry leaders, and also including the HR leaders. Tata's came to Hosur for Titan watches. But Tata made it very clear, one of his visions is bringing an industry there is to improve the local employment there. He clearly defined you have to recruit from 5 of these districts around. And he told the HR guys, you go train the people and say, this is what I expect. Even tell them these are the questions you'll have to answer. So they prepared themselves, got them employed. I do not know, that is the kind of vision we have. I wish Smriti Irani is here, I'll need to ask regarding the national level, but at the industry level is not there, at least we are the change agents. I think we can think of what skill does it take and why not we reinvent? Why have to keep complaining about the industry, or the educational institutions? Credit to Rajesh Gupta. Thank you so much.
I think there's one very pertinent point that you mentioned about was, local employment. Can you hear me? Yeah. About local employment. I think we need more satellite towns around, and possibly well-developed satellite towns which could take over from these metros which possibly have got saturated. And it takes quite a bit of effort to have people migrate at a cost, right? And for example, if I really look in the last 35 years that I've been in industry, I still see the same set of metros or mini metros like Bombay, then Delhi, of course, has expanded into Gurgaon, then you got Bangalore, then Chennai, Calcutta, and maybe I can add Hyderabad and Pune. Yes, Pune. So, but in Tamil Nadu, I find some of these actually townships coming up, like Coimbatore is one to mention. So we might be needing a lot of these satellite towns to come up across which becomes actually a hub of good skills and opportunities. And that is where your question on vision could be served. And of course, it is up to the organizers to get Smriti Irani over here to answer your question further.
I actually forgot the question. The question was TCA doing something like this.
See, in fact, Jet, you want to take the question before? See, almost every organization, large organization is doing something similar, like, what Prem mentioned earlier, right? And in TCS, we are looking at, so like an earlier speaker mentioned, skill gap is good, right? If it was not skill gap, if it was not for skill gap, you will not be forced to innovate. Right, 15, 20 years back, we would have said that we will hire only engineers. Like a lot of companies, for example, TCS, Infosys, Cognizant, we are looking at art science students, like getting into, see, we have an elaborate affirmative action program, getting into all rural areas, hiring people, specifically invest a lot on training to look at placing them in specific job roles, and with very good levels of success, right, in brief. I'm sure PayPal also, she mentioned earlier about the NGOs and business challenges and all that. So I'm sure every organization is doing something on this. And your question to Smriti Irani, we'll pass it on to Times Now, and I'm sure it'll be a great debate at 9 o'clock today or tomorrow.
And I also think it's a win-win for organizations, right? We are looking at not so time-tested avenues. I think there is also a vested interest in organizations to look at not so time-tested avenues. Like I also spoke about bringing second career women to work. We never thought that population was a potential population we could explore. We've seen huge success, and we want to do it every year. We're looking at 100 women. We will absorb probably about 10 to 30 depending on where they fit in. But we want to impart that knowledge to at least 100 women, and we hope that that will itself give them the confidence to go out. We're doing something called Girls to Code, where we are going straight to schools, and we've done 2 such programs where we are going to NGOs, where basically there are kind of underprivileged children that may not have the comforts as some of us may have, and bringing them for boot camps and teaching them technology and how to code. I think it's a journey. I don't think we have all the answers yet, but we definitely are thinking about some of the newer elements.
Over to the gentleman there, raised his hand earlier. Oh, sorry. Okay, we'll come to you, madam, shortly. Yes. Please go ahead.
After 10 before 1 year, before the people for the military training, like our army, there are tremendous opportunity to learn, get to adapt to all environment, and give them more skill. What required? So the skill what a leadership should have, they will give in short time. 1 year is more than enough. If you put them in Army, Navy or Air Force, definitely it will give them a long-standing values, traits, what they need for their life. Because I'm a defense man, definitely I will suggest this, because this will help you in long run. You will get qualities like punctuality. You will be always on time. You will be adaptable to all the stress, right? So this can be taken forward because a lot of countries are doing this.
Thank you. 1 year of military training. I'm sure doctors are going to be in extreme demand, rolling out a lot of medical certificates for not fit for medical duty, right? The lady at the back, issues. And we will just take the last 2 questions. Yeah, we'll come to you after that. And
this is Aarti from Cognizant. You talked about a structural problem which is at scale, and I think I heard Rajesh also talking about, Rakesh talking about personalization required in learning. So what are your views on what's the role of the government, what's the role of the corporate, and thirdly, the public-private partnership? Which segment should each of these tackle? Thanks.
Vijay, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, with all due respect to some of the suggestions that were coming in, I think we're trying to boil the ocean here, right? And there's a certain amount of bandwidth all of us are attempting to drive results inside organizations or inside industry. To answer your specific question, ma'am, I think There are initiatives that are taking place. I don't think these are new initiatives. There's obviously a scale at which they are happening today that they weren't happening, let's say, 15 years ago. But that's more a demographic issue, right? The government is recognizing that if we have 600 million people without jobs 15 years from now, we're going to have a social problem, we're going to have a political problem, and therefore there is a added urgency to addressing it, right? All of the solutions that I've heard so far, right, and I want to bring this up I think have been what I call industrial solutions, right? You take the product and you do something to it. Which is you take the individual and we are trying to engineer, manufacture, improve the individual. I want us to look back a little further to a more agricultural solution, if I can call it that, right? Which is, you take a farmer and he plants the seed, right? If the seed doesn't grow, the farmer does nothing to the seed. He does things to the environment so that the seed grows, right? And we've got to, I think, shift our minds towards saying the problem is not with the individual. I disagree with what Rakesh said about individuals having trainability. I think everybody is trainable. Everybody has potential, and there is fundamentally we are looking at the wrong thing if we believe that individuals are the problem. Individuals, sure, they have gaps and they need help in fixing those gaps. But organizations need to look at solutions that enable people to do so. The whole thing that Jayanti spoke about, second career women, that's a way of enabling people to stay in the workforce, to grow and become better. We've got to look at what do we need to change inside organizations and industry rather than address the individual, right? I don't know if I answered your question, but I have a strong point of view which we can take offline at the end of this. Back to you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I believe that we need to shift focus when we talk about skills to be imparted to the individuals, employees, or whoever it is. I think that the value proposition should be that we should give you what you want, right? But usually what happens, it happens the other way. I'm going to give you what I want. And that's where the problem arises. I'm talking about the industry setup, not the larger context of other segments. So the value proposition has to change from I need to give you what you want rather than I need to train you the way I want. And when that happens, possibly the responsibility is going to shift on the individual immensely, because the organization or your employers or the government is providing you an opportunity to build up skills that you want. And that is where a lot of the responsibility comes on you as to putting in a lot of effort. So it could be 50-50, 60-40, whatever it is. I tell my employees that we are investing in you, but you also have to invest in yourself. It works both ways. So I don't know whether it half answers your question, but then it has to be flipped. It has to be flipped. We can't design programs that have to be force-fitted into people. We have to design programs that people require. And that is where I talked about, one-to-one proposition of doing training rather than having many-to-many.
Thank you. We'll take the last question.
I'm Jai Shankar, General Manager HR from banking industry. So in my opinion, by and large, the issue of skill gap should be confined to basics or entry level. If we say the problem is with the middle level or higher leadership level, then probably we have to blame the organization. Because your HR department is not doing all your succession planning or job rotation or giving them training, or you blame the training system. So by and large, the society, all the training institutions depends on basically the engineering colleges or basic management institutes. The problem is, 40 years back, most of the institutions, they take from the entry level basic graduates, they train them, then put them into the lab. The job is actually lifetime employment. Now situation is changed. Organizations are hungry. They are not prepared to train the people. They want to take people from with the skill sets, which is not readily available. The institutions, particularly engineering college or basic management institutes, can only teach fundamentals or basics. You cannot expect the skills can be taught in the training systems of the schools or college institutions. It is up to the organizations. Say they don't have the capacity or they don't have patience to train them. So the issue is more are the organizations. So if you blame the institutions, then probably the fundamentals are not taught by the institutions properly. So the issue, if you take a skill gap as such at the basic level, then all the organizations should collaborate with, integrate with the basic institutions, then seek that the basic subjects are the main things are not changed or updated, and then help them to come out the best graduates or fundamentals. So this is a society problem where all the corporates should help most of the institutions to give them structural changes in their programs or their education system to give them. So it is an issue of a basic level, at entry level. It's not an issue of the organization at the higher level. So our topic should be confined only to the entry level, where how far the organizations can help them, the institutions, to change the syllabus or bring them what is required for the today's context, particularly skill gap or technological changes. I hope the forum will confine to that aspect mainly.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Extremely well said. Yeah, please.
Just wanted to share my perspective. I think you said it right. The problem with the institution, I think the institution starts from the family. In fact, we were discussing, for example, when my son or daughter wants to do a course, do the parents decide or the child decide? Still we have a social issue, because I have to tell outside that my child is doing so-and-so studies, right? That's one. Number two, then after that there are continuously the social pressure. In fact, Vijay was telling, when somebody said that in other countries, not many people do graduations, post-graduation, PhD and so on. Here every third person is PhD and post-graduation and so on. So the question, in fact, Vijay was asking, so will you be okay to tell your child that it's okay, you don't have to study after class 12, right? So there is an amount of preparedness in the family level and societal level is an issue. But in a larger level, we don't have to be very critical of ourselves, but still the challenge is there and opportunity is there. So in another 4 years, India is going to account for around 25% of global workforce. That's a huge opportunity. So I'm sure we will continue to discuss this. Probably some of us may not be there, 22 years old, young, so-called, they call it as a chief performance officer. In future, finance and people functions are going to be managed by one person. So that's, but still we have if you look at university ranking by QS ranking or time higher educations, we are nowhere there.
So I have an aside really. There's something called Shirky's law. Okay, like Murphy's law. There's a Shirky's law, right? Clay Shirky made the statement saying institutions will seek to preserve the problems to which they are the solution, right? It is not in the interest of training companies to solve the training problem. Okay, they would like the issue to persist. It is not in the enterprises are driving their own goals. They are not here to address the issue of universities till it affects them. Okay, I don't think we can expect enterprises to solve the problems of the education sector. They will address it only to the extent that it solves their problems. It's a myth that, it's a fallacy to expect anything different. As people inside large organizations and enterprises, I think we should attempt to solve this problem to the extent that it's possible for us.
Thank you. And like what David mentioned, that after 25 years we'll have a similar discussion. Only change is a lot of the futurists who look at future and look at what jobs will be taken away. They have mentioned 2 jobs or 2 skills which can never be replaced by robots. And those skills or those jobs will still remain. And HR manager is not one of them, right? And hopefully we'll still have the problem, but we won't have HR managers to discuss that problem. But if you're interested, what are those skills that will still not be replaced by robots? It is plumbers. Second is kindergarten teachers. Yeah. So if you want to reskill or retrain, we have told you what are the skills you need to retrain. Yes, that's correct. So we'll wind up this discussion. Thank you for being a wonderful audience and asking us only the easy questions. But
Save the difficult ones.
yeah, so he says we have saved the difficult ones for later. So we'll quickly take 2 minutes to sum up the whole discussion here. One is skill gap exists. It has always existed. It does exist. It has become wider. But so are opportunities, right? There are phenomenal opportunities brought by demographics, brought by the young India. There is, no reason to really be worried. There are phenomenal opportunities. And what are we going to do to address those skill gaps? Look at innovative solutions. In terms of skill gap is good. If not for the gap, we will not innovate. So we heard a lot of initiatives, trends about how we bring in CSR to address skill gap, a lot of second career for women. And look at, like as HR managers, let's not look at age-old solutions. Let us look at a lot of analytics on how we look at the business problem better. So we heard a lot of perspectives on that. How do we reposition the whole problem better? How do we customize solutions? And finally, organizations cannot sit on a pedestal and say, hey, there is skill gap, and society is not doing much, this is not doing much, quality is less and all that. So there is a lot of things that we as an organization can do. And to sum up the last point, that entry-level skill gap is important. So if you have a skill gap at the middle level, that's more of an organization's problem, not society's problem. So we look at innovative solutions. There is a lot of things that we can do to solve the skill gap so that we don't discuss this topic, whether HR managers or non-HR managers, 25 years from now. Okay. So thank you for being such a lovely audience. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, panelists, for the enlightening discussion and for sharing your views with us. I'm sure each one of us is taking back a lot of valuable insights. A special thanks to all the participants as well for being such an interactive audience.